Let's go.
Take those pills. Take those pills. Hey, here you go. Itching, sweating, take those pills. Thirsty, drowsy, take those pills. Worms, take those pills. I think you should take it. Oh! Itching, sweating, take those pills. Thirsty, drowsy, take those pills. Worms, take those pills. I think you should take it. Oh! Itching, sweating, take those pills. Thirsty, drowsy, take those pills. Worms, take those pills. Itchy all day. Here you go.
Let's go.
Take those pills. The full 30 days. Here you go. Hey, take those pills. Allergy pills. I think you should take it. Take those pills. The full 30 days. Here you go. Hey, take those pills. Allergy pills. 1, 2, 3, 4. Take those pills. The full 30 days. Here you go. Hey, take those pills. I think you should take it. Take those pills. The full 30 days. Here you go. Hey, take those pills. Allergy pills. I think you should take it. Take these pills. Those pills again. Take these pills. Take these pills again. Itching, sweating. Take those pills. Thirsty, drowsy. Take those pills. Worms. Take those pills. I think you should take it. Itching, take those pills. Thirsty, drowsy, take those pills. Worms. Oh, itchy all day. Here you go. Awesome. Take those pills. The full 30 days. Here you go. Hey, take those pills. Allergy pills. I think you should take it. Take those pills. The full 30 days. Here you go. Hey, take those pills. Allergy pills. I think you should take it. Take those pills. The full 30 days. Here you go. Hey, take those pills. Allergy pills. I think you should take it. Take those pills. The full 30 days. Here you go. Hey, take those pills. Allergy pills. I think you should take it.
Christopher Robin, what exactly is doing nothing?
Well, I'm told it means going along, listening to all the things you can't hear, and not bothering.
what I like, and I does what I like, and I
Association Chat will get started in just a second, but before that, let's hear from Blake Alvin for this episode's podcast tip.
Associations are usually trying to communicate with existing members and attract new members, and sometimes communicating information to the public. With so many forms of media available, it can be hard to know which is best for which situation. You can spend a ton of time, energy, and money really quickly. But what's the best way to maximize your efforts? Video is one of those options. Now, I'm not against video, but to do video well constantly can be costly and take a great team. And once you have a great video, getting somebody to sit down, watch, and absorb the information can be tricky also. I want to repeat those words again. Sit down, watch, absorb. With a well-made audio show, the audience is now freed from the screen and all the distractions that go with it. You can listen to a podcast anywhere. On a daily commute, at your kid's Little League game, mowing the lawn, vacuuming, doing your expense report, going for your daily run, making dinner, going to lunch. This allows the listener to find out more about your organization and topics on their time and when they want it. And if done right, it can be more intimate, technical, and human all at the same time. So to sum up, a podcast is cheaper than video, very intimate, eyes-free and on-demand, typically gets longer listen times with a deeper dive, and is easier to get somebody who's camera shy. So give a podcast a try. You can thank me later. For more tips and tricks and free information about podcasting, go to humanfactor.net.
Welcome to Culture.
Welcome to Association Chat, produced by Amplified Growth and Human Factor, talking about all things association, nonprofit, and anything else that pops into my mom's head. And now, here is your host, Kiki L'Italian.
I love this. This is so great. I feel so excited. I hear her voice, and it's that time of the week.
Mom.
I love you too, wherever you are.
Love you, Mom.
I love you too. That is disturbing.
Love you, Mom.
Blake, it's making me nervous now.
Yeah?
I'm
Why's
feeling
that?
nervous. Yeah.
She wants something.
I know. I'm like, you should be in school. Oh my God.
She wants something.
You should be in school. She's getting something. This weekend, we're going to have 8 little girls, almost 11 years old, in our house for her birthday. Can you believe that? Yeah, you don't laugh when you know what that is.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm trying to prepare myself.
Say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Association Chat. I am your host, Kiki L'Italian. I'm here with Blake Alvin.
Hi.
I want to give a quick shout out to our wonderful sponsors right at the top of the show. And I want to say thank you to Human Factor, responsible for the show.
Hi.
Yes, say hi, Blake.
Hi,
All
Blake.
right. And I want to say thanks to Human Workplaces. And so thank you to Human Workplaces. And I'm going to say thank you to myself, Amplified Growth.
You
Thank
should.
you. Thank you to myself.
You should.
Yes. So today's show is super exciting because we are talking about something that is part of every discussion that I'm ever a part of at every meeting that ever happens for associations.
Yeah.
Where it's talking about our associations dying.
Hear that all the time.
Or our associations dead.
not
Our
dead yet.
associations obsolete, and all of these ideas about, for some reason, why the association model is something that's broken. And today we have with us 2 special guests. One that I invited who speaks a lot about this particular topic, talking about eruption and not disruption, and that's Brian Carter. And Brian Carter, let me just say, yes. Hi, Brian. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and let me say a little bit about Brian. So he's the #1 best-selling author of The Like Economy, LinkedIn for Business, Facebook Marketing, and The Cowbell Principle. He's respected as an international authority on how organizations of all sizes can create and retain business using the internet.
Wow.
Yes. And I also get to welcome my good friend Adele Sears, who is with her newly rebranded agency, When and How. She's the author of The Spike Principle. Is it The Spike Principle?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. There's a longer part of the title, and I can't ever remember that part. But she also has so many different things that she's working on. And I thought I was interviewing her for a quick little synopsis, and then it became
This thing.
Watch out.
Which is what's so great about Association Chat and why I look forward to this time every week. So I'm glad that you could join us to talk with Brian and to talk with all of you.
Yay.
So do we just dive in?
We're going to
dive.
Let's go ahead and dive in. So
associations are dead. That's what we've learned.
Well,
so
and
far?
that's the end of the show. Cue the music, Blake. All right. This episode of Association Chat. So are associations dead? What are some of Brian? Okay. We wouldn't have Association Chat if associations were dead. So let's talk a little bit about the trends that you've been seeing out there that are causing some of these major shifts and what people are calling disruption to different industries.
Yeah. Well, so there's a ton, because we're in a time of increasingly rapid change, right? It's not slowing down. It's not changing, that there's more and more change, right? But I think we have a lot of organizations, both in and outside of the association world, where people have not figured out how to adapt to this pace of change. How do they stay close to their customers and their members? In associations case, how do they make sure that they're satisfied, right? Because the essence of disruption is somebody else comes in with something that's better than what you have. It's more convenient, or it's cheaper, or it's just better in some way, right?
Yeah.
So they come in because they've got something new and better, and people love new stuff, right? And if loyalty only goes so far, right? So we can talk about how to increase loyalty, but if people start offering something phenomenally better than what you have, you're going to lose customers, members, employees.
Well, and that's something that I know that we're seeing, where associations, that it was the only way that you could connect and network with people who are like you, who are in the same industry that you are, until social media comes along. And then all of a sudden we have other ways to connect. Well, then people are saying, well, but we have the loyalty. Yeah. We have our conferences. We have our peer-reviewed journals. And in each case, we have for-profits who are coming and they're offering their own version of that. And sometimes in a different or a better way. And so it is no wonder why a lot of associations are saying, all right, what now?
You've got Facebook groups, you've got online learning. There are a ton of people providing learning online. So do your members want to travel, right? For example, is your association offering online learning, in a competitive way? And for the conferences, which are huge, because a lot of people really value that. That's what I find when I speak at these conferences. Association members are excited to be there. They want to get together. They want to take a break. They want to recharge and learn. But, is your event the best one for them? I mean, they like the industry knowledge. It's certainly great to connect to people that do what you do. But what if they start thinking, but I could go to this other event that does this, and maybe it does that better than they do it at my association conference, right? So you have competition for your events, because how many events are they really going to go to in a year?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So these are all things you have to think about. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah. I think Mark Cuban said something so interesting the other day, and he said, the employees, the vendors that really stick around are the people that take some type of pressure off of me as a business owner and a business operator. And I feel like if you always have to go out to an event, if you always have to spend a certain amount of money, is that relieving pressure? How are you figuring out how to relieve pressure for your attendee, for your member? And are you giving them different options? And I think associations are so set in their ways.
Right.
They're not necessarily giving people different ways to interact with them as a brand.
That's interesting.
And that could be more powerful.
Yeah. I want to acknowledge the people who are watching live, who a lot of people are tuning in now. Instead of we're not doing it on Crowdcast anymore, we're doing it on YouTube. And I see that Anne and Scott and Reed, you're all over here. And so I'm glad to see you guys on the show. So ask your questions over in the chat box. We're watching. It's interesting because there are so many different ways that associations and any company, any organization has of reaching their potential audience, their potential customers or members. And I think associations are a lot of times stuck in the old ways of doing things. And then if they're going to try something new, if one thing fails, it's like they're done, right? It's like, okay, we tried it. It didn't work. See, we know our members.
Right.
That's all she wrote, you know.
I got two thoughts on that. Number one, I mean, it's not limited to the association world, but, companies that stagnate, that say, the way we've done it is good enough. I mean, these days, good enough is not good enough, because what disruption means is that something comes out of nowhere and blindsides you. And all the people who were not really avidly into you will go away.
Right.
So, good enough is not good enough. You have to stay close to your customers or your members. And that means you're constantly getting overwhelmingly good feedback, right? Which means you have to have a feedback loop with them, maybe surveys, but that's not always the best way. So I know we're going to end up talking about, creativity and new ideas and all that stuff. You have to have a create, measure, learn cycle going on, right? Which means, to your point, we have to be okay with some stuff not working. We have to be prepared to try 5 or 10 ideas. And if only 2 or 3 of them work, that's a success, right? It's okay to fail 70% of the time if you're testing a lot of stuff. You don't have to test on a huge scale. You can micro test things to get, an idea of what's going to happen. But if you don't have that mindset that we test a lot of stuff and we look at the results and we're constantly improving, and that has caused us to know more about our members, and it's caused us to get more and more member satisfaction, then you're just not going to be able to grow and maybe not even survive.
I love that you're saying that, because it is something where, and I listened to a lot of your interviews and some of your presentations that were available online before this so that I could get a better idea about some of your positions on things. And you brought up this idea of it's not enough to have a good idea. You need to have several. And so,
and you don't know what's a good idea, right?
You have we don't
know until they tell us, right? And they can tell us through one of those feedback mechanisms, which, I mean, we use a lot of times, whether it's Facebook or Google ads, we use ads because that's an easy way to get out to people. You can do it through email too, to your members. However you do it, you have to have a measurable way to know they like this more than average, right? Like your email subject line, what's the open rate, right? If you put the thing in the subject line and only 5% of people open it, that's not very good. But if 30% opened it, you're onto something.
Right. So I was talking with, it's so funny because one of the people that I know well who has idea after idea, she's an idea machine, is actually Adele. And Adele. And so she really can't help herself.
I can't.
And so,
I'm sorry.
So, I mean, I'm sure you're just like holding yourself back right now.
No, I'm not.
But she's an idea machine. What's funny, though, is that as an idea machine, you have to also know what ideas are maybe not so great, right? Like, because you can't go with, okay, let's take all of them. Like these 20 ideas or 120 ideas that we just came up with, let's just go with all of them. You have to somehow figure out which ones are losers. And so one of the things that I was going to interview Adele about earlier before the live show it ties into this, right? And so I figured, well, why not just have you come on the show with Brian? But she was just quoted in Fast Company in an article that had to do with how you identify what bad ideas are.
Yeah.
So can you share some of what just came out about that? Because that's That just came out yesterday or the day before, right?
Yeah, it did.
Okay.
So I have 3 tips from people on that. One is to consult weak ties in your network. Don't consult people that you know really well, because they will likely support your idea even if it's bad, because they don't want to tell you bad news to your face. But if they don't know you that well, right? If they don't know you that well, they're more likely to say, you know what? I don't think that's going to work. That's
true. My wife laughs at all my jokes. He's a bad audience.
Right. I have a friend who laughs so loudly, and she's got this infectious laugh that you leave her thinking, God, I'm really funny. And then you say it to someone else,
and they're like, wow.
You're just not as funny.
I know Blake doesn't laugh at any of my jokes.
No.
I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
No.
So
I thought we were closer than that.
Yeah, I have to laugh at your jokes. That's what Brian's for. Not this Brian.
Not this one. My husband, Brian.
Although this one could too.
Yeah.
Nice.
The second idea is to use social psychology, right? Will people promote your idea for you?
Yeah.
And if they won't promote your idea for you, you likely have a bad idea. If they won't go out and talk to other people about your idea, it might be a loser, right? That might be dead in the water.
Oh God, that kills me. That kills me.
It's tough.
Loser.
And the final tip, the third tip is ask a friend to explain your idea to someone else and see how much of that idea they got right.
Oh,
well, that's pretty cool.
You know?
It is cool. Actually, Adele tested me on this the other day, and I'm realizing it now. And I didn't.
How did she test you? I want to hear the test.
She actually had me. It was an idea that we were talking about. She had me repeat it back to her, and now I know what you were doing. So that's very good.
She's messing with you?
I'm learning all the time.
Watch out. Well, I wanted to go back to something I know about Brian, just because Brian and I are friends too. But he did this really cool Facebook ad that had some really interesting results. Brian, could you tell about the furniture ad that you did?
Oh, Brian,
where
do tell
the results were really
furniture
surprising.
ad.
Furniture
It's
ad.
good. It's a good story.
Yeah. Well, in my keynote, I talk about 6 or 7 different examples of, what really works for different audiences and how you really have to test in order to find out what. And I'm not talking about what works. I'm talking about what works at an amazingly high level, right? Because good enough's not good enough. So, this one was, we were working with so we have an agency, Facebook ad and Google ad agency, in addition to the keynote speaking I do. And so we're working with this client, and they're a membership organization in home furnishing, right? So they want to get more leads for more customers. And so we're running lead gen campaigns. Now their merchandising department said, hey, run this photo of the furniture, which was all white and clean and modern and everything. And they're like, this is good stuff. We think this will win. We also tested against like brown and red kind of traditional furniture. And we found that across most of the United States, people preferred the brown and red furniture that the merchandising department thought was ugly, right? And so they preferred it so much that we got 6 times as many leads. The leads were 1/6 the cost, right?
Wow.
So you want to 6x your results.
Yeah.
That was just testing 2 different images, right?
Yeah.
So you have to have this testing approach. But the other thing that was interesting was that people in New York and California preferred the white, clean, modern furniture. So we also had to regionalize, right? That's personalizing and segmenting people and realizing that not everybody wants to see the same thing. And if you think of all your customers or your members as one group that's all the same, you're not going to get the best results. You got to subdivide them at 2-3 segments at least.
So segmentation is such an important thing. And we hear people talk about the importance of doing that. And I don't think that from what I've seen, I don't think most organizations do that enough.
They don't. I don't know why they have trouble with it. Like if they don't understand it or
I don't think they don't understand it. I think they want to please most of their members. It's a majority.
Yeah.
I want to please most people, and they don't want to hear from the people that maybe have differing opinions. They don't, because that's counterintuitive to what the association's representing.
That's interesting.
But I mean,
It
I
is
think if
interesting.
more associations got comfortable listening to some of those voices, I think they could be much more effective in marketing.
Well, we're talking about an ad here and what the feedback is from that and what the discoveries are from that. But what if we think about that even deeper and we start thinking about the communication that's going out, the way, as you're reaching out to each member, how they prefer overall in the do they want it to be friendlier? Do they want it to be a little bit more, professional and sort of, the tone of it? Like, how far do you go?
Well, look, I think it starts with who the people are, right? Who are you talking to, and how are those people different from each other, or separate into different groups? And I can't think of a single marketing campaign we've done where there was just one target. And I can't think of a single keynote I've ever done where in the questionnaire and the customization process, we don't discover there are at least 2 or 3 very different groups of people at that keynote, right? Even in associations, they'll be like, well, we got really big companies, and we got medium, and then we got small ones, or we got the people who have done some internet stuff, and then people who haven't done anything, So
I get
just
that. Yeah.
There's so many different ways to divide those people up. And then you don't necessarily have to send 2 or 3 different emails.
Yeah.
You could just make sure that anything you offer covers all those things. Because from a sales perspective, you're thinking, what are people going to object to? One of the fundamental things people object to is, this is not for me. It's not relevant to me. They're not speaking to me. And that's not a 1 or 0 thing. That's not on or off. It could be like, they're only 70% speaking to me. They're only 30% speaking to me. This is only resonating so much. So when you say, hey, this new course or the conference is going to help you with help big companies and medium and small companies. It's going to help people who haven't done any internet and people who have done some internet. Then you've taken away objections that are in their brain that are going to keep them from participating. So you're preventing objections ahead of time.
So let me actually put both of you on the spot right now, because there's somebody I know who is watching, who I worked on a project with them, and we worked with a dying association. We worked with an association, and in the industry, they had once been the big guns. They'd been like, they were the ones to belong to. Yes, raw. They were power. And what happened was, of course, it was truly disruption and not eruption. And it was their members changed, the industry changed. And so they started losing members. They started losing attendees at their formerly really well attended conferences.
How long in time was this? How long did it take?
It did not take long. I mean, I'm saying that when I say 10 years, it's like that's probably stretching it out a little bit longer, but dramatically decreasing every year once it really kicked into gear. Huh. And they had for-profit companies that were then holding great big conferences, competing with what they were known for. And they're like, we know our members. Our members don't actually care about the educational sessions at our conferences. They only care about the parties. They only care about, this stuff. Yeah. and so really all they could concretely say for sure was that their members like to party, was really what it all came down to.
That's good. That's good to know, though.
Great feedback.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to know. But then, so strategy-wise, what do you end up doing? And I can tell you, they were so confident that they knew their members. They knew their members, what they really cared about, that they kind of tuned out any advice about how well do you know your members? What is it that they're looking for? Because as you can imagine, their members were probably aware that their profession was changing and how they made money was changing. So maybe their members weren't exactly who they thought they were after all.
Yeah.
So what I want to say to you is when there's an association that's going through that and they just are confident that they know who their members are, but they're continuing to see the decrease, what's one of the first things you would say that they should do?
Yeah, I would say if you really knew your members, you wouldn't be facing this decrease. Okay. Yeah. So we have some evidence, right? You got to have measurements. You got to be able to quantify things. And, I don't want to be pedantic here, but I I think scientifically. And so I think if you say we know our members, I'm like, okay, that's a great hypothesis. Or this is true about our members. Great hypothesis. Unproven. How do we prove it? So you send out an email where you're like, here's this parties at our conference. And you send out another email that says, here's our education tracks. Which open rate is better? That's one way to just confirm that you're right or wrong, right? There are so many ways to do this stuff. But again, and I know that we can talk about creativity, but if you're constantly creating new things, and digital marketing, advertising works so well for this because it's measurable. You can get this feedback from people constantly. They don't know they're being surveyed, so you're not going to get spurious results. You just know they clicked on it, they didn't. They opened it, they didn't. They were interested enough to go to the website, or they weren't. And so you have to be constantly learning from that. And to learn from it, you have to put out all these different things. So you can get all your people together and say, all right, so what do we think we know? Right? These are all the things we think are true. Okay, how do we test that now in our marketing? How do we, or which of those, we think they like 4 things or 5 things. Which ones do they like the most? Right? How do we test that? And if you don't have that approach, you could be wrong. If you're wrong, you could go out of business. So you can't afford to do it.
Scott says, test it and prove them right or wrong. You guys are right in sync. And Barry says, he forgot to sign in, but he's here now. So he's excited to be here. So it's
Thanks,
good to
Barry.
see. Thank you, Barry.
Yay.
Adele, what
Barry's
do you say
here.
about that? Barry's here. Barry, we've been waiting for you. Oh my gosh. What do you have to say about that? Because we just had a creativity workshop in DC where we met with a group of people, association executives, and talked a little bit about some of these things that we're talking about today.
I think you have to have a really good facilitator, somebody who's in the marketing department who can facilitate the ideas and who can pull in good ideas, bad ideas, not make people feel badly about what it is they come up with, even if it is a bad idea.
Right.
Validate where needed, but also push for the best idea. And I think a lot of the times you'll have a marketing facilitator who gets a bunch of people in the room, wants everybody to feel like they're part of the process, and then goes and does whatever they want. And I feel like you really need a marketer who listens, a marketer who's willing to test, a marketer who's willing to be wrong. And I think once you get that kind of feedback, then you can put some ideas into place. You can test, you can figure it out. I think we're working with a very risk-averse population. They don't want to be wrong.
Right.
The marketer especially doesn't want to be wrong. So when you have so much feedback, I think that's really the challenge for many association executives. It's just too much feedback.
Right.
So you need that marketer to be a facilitator for you. And if they're not a good facilitator, it's really tough.
Can I just add a personal complaint here, though? I need to add if you do anything with marketing, PR, anything like that, there are so many people who think that because they have a Facebook account that they understand marketing. They know it so well. Yeah. And I think part of the barrier that a lot of really smart, intelligent people who are out there in their positions, part of the barrier that they're running into is that they're fighting having to educate and prove their ideas are worth something. They're trying to be heard, and they don't even know how to get their ideas out there.
Yeah.
Because
there are a lot of problems. I mean, sorry, go ahead.
No, please, you're the guest.
Well, thank you. Well, one of them is there's definitely not a lot of education in marketing. There's not a standardized education. A lot of the education in marketing is from 30 years ago. So I mean, I'm on Reddit all the time now. I'm fascinated by it. And there are people talking all the time, get a lot of interesting feedback. And I know that a lot of them are younger. They skew 20, 30 years old and geekier than others. But there's in the marketing Reddit on there are a lot of people who are just like, I need more education. I just don't know this, or I'm being asked to do a social media audit and I don't know how to do it. This is a marketing person. Right. And there's a lot of different ways to do that audit. And this is just an example, but if you don't focus on the goals and measurement, you could come back with all kinds of useless information in your audit. So there's an education issue. There's no standardization in marketing education. There's a lot of new stuff that's happened in the last 10 years that people are not educated on. And then this wanting to be right. I mean, some people they can't be wrong. So number one, they can't learn. No one can teach them. That's not allowed to happen. Okay, well, you're going to become a dinosaur, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead. It's like once I just think if you never want to be wrong, you're definitely going to be wrong. That's the problem with that perspective is if you have to always be right, you're going to be wrong. There's
so good.
I know, it's so good. I want to hold that thought because we have something real quick. Blake, why don't you push the button, Blake?
Welcome to Culture Tips, brought to you by Human Workplaces. Be brutally honest, that's number one. Look for patterns in your culture, that's the second one. Start with agility, then work on transparency. Technology is culture, don't you see?
Culture tip number 1, be brutally honest. When we talk about culture, we tend to be aspirational. We describe the ideal culture that we want. There's nothing wrong with aspiration, that's normal, but it's actually not where you should start on your culture journey. Instead, start by describing your culture in a truthful way that you might not ever share with the outside world. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Include all of its contradictions, problems, and confusing elements, as well as the great things that help you succeed. The goal is to start with a clear picture of what is. We often try to get from A to B without starting with truly understanding the A.
That was Culture Tips brought to you by humanworkplaces.net.
All right. So thank you so much. That was awesome. What I want to jump into right now is I want to talk about the war for talent, because that's one of the biggest issues that we have unemployment rates at the lowest that they have been for just ages.
It's got to be a good thing, right?
It is a good thing and a bad thing, though. Depends on how it's measured. Also depends on who's looking for talent, right? And so for associations, a lot of times there has always, not just there has always been, many times there has been a situation where they are not the ones that are offering up the best salaries. They're not getting the edgiest or the most creative talent that's out there. And when we're talking about a time when there are so many things changing and we need ideas and we need sharp and bright and beautiful people, their brains anyway, to be able to keep us edgy. What advice do you have about attracting the best talent?
Yeah, well, I mean, so the best talent is the best talent for you, right? It's the best talent for your culture and for what you need, and the best for them, the person that you hire, right? So, I mean, you have to know what your culture is and who you want to fit into it, and you have to be able to say to a candidate. I mean, it's crazy. This seems backwards from the way that we used to hire. It's like, well, they should want my job. I got money. And they're going to have a job.
Not anymore.
That's not the way it is now, because you've got, I don't know, maybe a third of Gen Y isn't working at all. And then another third is maybe part-time employed. So you need to be able to say what's attractive about our company that people would want to work here. Being able to attract people is a huge part of your job as an organization, whether it's customers, members, or employees. So what makes us attractive? How are they going to, and this is going to help you get the right person. Yeah. Because if you can say, hey, this is what our culture's like, this is what we value, this is how you're going to fit in, you're going to love it, then you're going to get the right person. You're going to waste you won't waste your time with a bunch of people who, I just want a job, and they get hired and they're like, I hate this place. It's not because you're bad. It's because you didn't find the right fit.
Right. I know we've had a lot of conversations, Adele, about the type of talent that associations bring in. And I think one of the things that you had talked to me about was like this idea, and it's definitely there. It's definitely present, that associations are like a government light. It's like it's this feel that a lot of people, once they get that association job, they kind of just sit there and they're like riding it out, right? I'm painting an ugly picture, and
it's not always true.
It's not always true, and there are
true
a lot
sometimes.
It's true sometimes, but people feel safe is the point, that I'm trying to make, and I think that draws people, and for whom safety rates higher than like the ability to maybe have something where they're not as confident that they're going to have their job. And they have a greater chance to move ahead or move up.
And this sounds so cliche, and a lot of people talk about it, but you have to make failure okay.
Yeah,
you have to make I like what Brian was saying. It's like micro tests. I think something like that really works in associations because they don't want to take big risks. However, we're in a time where taking big risks is more important than ever before. And you see it with some associations who really get out there and win when they take a stand about an issue that's so tied to what's important to their members. They really, really create big wins. And so I think the associations have to be prepared when an issue comes up that they feel passionately about. Are they going to be ready to take a stand? Are they going to be speedy enough, quick enough, bold enough to take a stand when it matters most? And the micro tests work, but you also have macro tests of, importance.
Yeah. And that actually feeds into what you were saying earlier, Brian, which is you're saying that, good enough is not good enough. And so when, you're talking about these associations that are trying to please everyone, and who can blame them? I mean, don't we all, right? I know I fall into that.
If I was paying my dues.
If you were paying your dues.
I want you to talk about my stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
You want me to talk about your stuff, but when something happens, where do you stand as the association, as the organization? Where do you stand? And I think that when organizations fail to have some kind of stance, that a lot of times they don't seem relevant anymore.
Yeah.
Because it seems like they're just kind of stepping back, right? They're stepping out of.
Well, I would probably leave that in Adele's hands because she's the PR expert. But I mean, at the same time, I just think there are a lot of different types of organizations that are in a lot of different places, right? So there may be some associations who are risk averse and they're stable and their members are doesn't do anything and they're fine. And so maybe taking a risk, bad idea for them, right? I don't know. You'd think you'd have to decide individually, but there are others like we've talked about where if their membership's going down, you got to figure out why, right? So you're going to have to make some changes internally. There could be changes to your marketing, to your culture, to whatever. And then when you're trying to get employees, you need to be able to reflect that in how you acquire those employees. And just to make sure it does get mentioned, we've done a bunch of Facebook ads and Instagram ads for staffing companies that help us get them job applicants for 1/4 the cost that it costs them on Career Builder. Okay. So I think that another issue with talent acquisition is that a lot of HR people think about that it really passively. They're not aggressive. They're not active. They're not marketers.
Right.
And so I think that bringing marketing into the discussion with HR about how do we acquire people, how do we get the right people, that's been one of the changes, right?
That is one of the changes because, it is such a competitive market for employers right now to try to get people. It's not like it used to be. And, in a time when creativity is definitely a hot commodity, you need to get those creative minds and the people who are willing to be entrepreneurs, have the entrepreneurial spirit within your organization and give you some of that,
But also we talked about segmentation, right?
Segmentation.
So just a shout out quickly to Sarah Sladek and all the work she does on generations. Because Brian, it's like how you attract certain employees, different things are going to work for different generations, right? So
that's a good point.
So your marketing has to be segmented even from a generational perspective. And that's what Sarah's group really does really well, is they look at that, and they look at the segmentation of generations and why they're attracted to associations because it's different.
I definitely, I think that one thing we can all agree on is that we need more ideas. We need more ideas. We need people who are actively thinking, challenging their assumptions, thinking creatively, and, not going with just the easygoing assumptions that they've made before on what works, or what doesn't work. And testing
it has to be
theories.
Constant learning, constant improvement, trying new things. That's the way it is today. And we found that same thing with generations. We've done marketing campaigns where, the things that worked for boomers and Gen X does not work for millennials, right? And you have to figure out what's going to work for the millennials. If you're trying to acquire talent, you have to think, well, what is the age range probably of this person? You have to be careful with the EOE stuff. Like, we're not discriminating against any particular age, but if we know this is probably going to be a Gen X person coming in this role, or it's probably going to be a millennial or whatever, you need to think about that when you write the job description, when you create ads for it, if you do that.
All right. So I have one more question for you guys, but quickly, I wanted to put this in here. Blake doesn't even know that I'm doing this right now.
Should I get music ready?
But yeah, just something exciting.
All right.
Or this. This is good. It's kind of like more of a, all right, I can do that. So if you're excited about this episode of Association Chat, then you want to have a logo mug. That's what you want to do. I just have that feeling. So if you're watching this right now live, this is only for people watching live right now. I want you to use the hashtag Association Mug Life. Mug Life. Like coffee mug. Like Thug Life, but for mugs. For coffee mugs. Yes. If you tweet how much you love Association Chat on Twitter right now, using hashtag Association
Brian,
Mug
tweet it.
Life.
Quick, Brian.
Is it okay for me to do it?
Yes.
No, you can't do it, Brian.
Yes, you can.
I'll send you your own mug. Then you will get an Association Chat logo mug and a beautiful bag of Swings coffee that comes from the local coffee roaster Swings here in Alexandria, Virginia. Yes, Association Mug Life. You know you want it. Okay. All right. So that was my giveaway. I thought I'd test that out. Yes, thank you. So here's my last question for you guys before we wrap it up. I wanted to talk to you about some of your ideas about what you think associations should do to really speak to members, draw them in a time, in a world, in a day, in an atmosphere, and the spiritual mist that is now, on how to draw them in a time when there's so much disruption and eruption in industries of every type. What are some of your ideas that you've been, I'm sure, sitting back, postulating, wondering, if only.
Postulating.
Do you like that?
I have to look that one up. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. So I think that number one, you got to have some kind of regular feedback cycle from your members.
Okay.
So are you doing a survey? How often? What's in that survey? What questions are you asking? Are those questions really helping you to achieve your goals afterwards, right?
Right.
What are your goals? Prioritize them. Make sure that you're going to measure achieving them, right? I mean, the reason I say these things is because every association situation is so different. So I'm trying to give you a process that's going to help any association, right? Mm-hmm. So, once you've got a feedback cycle, you've got the surveys, then, great. You've read them, you've made some conclusions, but are those conclusions correct? Then you can start doing some more testing. If your digital marketing people don't know how to do this measurable testing thing, get them some education. And then you can start getting more feedback that way, right? I think those are the most important things. And I'm not sure what percentage of associations are, they may have surveys, but are they really helping them? And are they doing this digital marketing feedback loop?
I love that. All right, Adele?
Yeah, I think the feedback loop is super important. I think associations have to be a little bit careful with surveys because I think they could be continually surveying the same people over and over again, right? Because they have a small group of very loud people that they're, so if they go with somebody like Brian who would do the testing, right, he would make sure he gets a much wider swath of folks.
And I
who
want
would
to
be
chime
involved
in.
that.
Like
Yeah.
at Best Buy, I bought a stupid TV there, and now I have to do a survey. I get one every freaking day, it seems like. Seriously.
Yeah, some are survey happy too. Some are like overly.
Yeah.
I think you have to make it like infotainment, right? You have to make the survey interesting. You have to make it fun. You have to make it light. I think for me, I think what is most associations are missing, and after working with them for over a decade, I think one of them they're missing a process. I think Brian kind of touched on this earlier. They don't necessarily have a marketing process that they're looking at. And I take people through when I do ideation sessions and workshops, and we're going to be doing more of those in the coming year. I take people through a scientific process using social psychology. How influential are you? What's your social proof like? What's your authority in the market? And I have very specific things that they can measure over time and measure again and again. And I feel like having that kind of process is really valuable for associations. And they always and we like to have the argument, this isn't just a good idea because I think it's a good idea and I think it's fun.
Yeah.
It's rooted in social psychology. And I think people love science. And Brian's big on that as well. I think they just like
and that's great. What you're talking about, once you have that social proof and all those things that come out of the process, you can use those to create advertisements or emails or whatever. That's, you've got to apply it.
Well, I don't know what to say, you guys. This has been an amazing conversation. I want to thank you, Adele. I want to thank you, Brian, for joining me today. You know what, Blake? Can we show Brian's website real fast?
Sure. Well, hold on. I got to find that.
Well,
button.
there's two. Unfortunately, there are two.
Can I?
Which one do you want to go to?
I have BrianCarterGroup.com.
Yeah, that's our agency. And
right.
For the keynote speaking, it's keynotespeakerbrian.com. But you can just Google Brian Carter, and there's a football player that's not me. And
are you dating a celebrity or something? There was
there is somebody on, I don't know what TV show. I can't remember.
I told you I did my search. I was looking for information on you. I'm like, that's not the Brian I'm interviewing.
Or is it?
Or is it? I know. It's a good question.
So I have this site up. Do you want to show around really quick? Before?
Yeah. So this is a little information on the Brian Carter Group site, BrianCarterGroup.com, for those who are listening to this on the podcast
so
version.
So if you have
later.
an association, you're looking for a speaker.
If you're looking for a keynote speaker, and it is amazing. I've only heard
really
great things, So, and then also...
Does he tell jokes?
I'm way funnier than you've seen on this podcast.
Oh my God.
I just don't like doing all those prepared bits, like pretending like they're live.
Oh my
Okay, here's
gosh.
one. All right.
Okay.
I don't believe it's cool to teach dogs to shake hands because they have no idea what they're agreeing to. Get rid of the canned laughter.
Yeah, I had it ready for you. Come on.
I actually, oh my God.
I got much bigger laughs if you want them.
See, for people who don't
I usually get much bigger laughs.
We need that. And then Adele. So Adele, you're in the midst of you're doing a rebrand. So I don't know if you want to actually share your new site or not yet.
I'm not great.
Not yet.
I'm not ready yet.
So
I'm not ready yet. So soon the unveil will happen.
So yes. But if you love Association Chat and you love the show, hopefully you're going to participate in the giveaway. Hopefully you'll come back next week to watch live as we interview David Beebe.
David Beebe.
Yeah, David Beebe. And that's going to be an exceptional show. And if you want more information about either of our guests, check out the show notes where we're going to have more links to more resources for both of them. And until next time, everybody, be the boss.
Be the boss.
Be the boss.
Thanks for listening to Association Chat, produced by Amplified Growth and Human Factor. For more information on Amplified Growth, go to amplifiedgrowth.com.
Welcome to
making podcasts for your association. Go to Human Factor at humanfactor.net. To hear past episodes, go to the Association Chat YouTube channel and subscribe. See you